In August 1944, Paris was already wired to be destroyed. Every bridge, every monument, Notre Dame, the Eiffel Tower. Tons of explosives waited beneath the city, and one German general held the order that would turn Paris into ash. The Allies were hours away. Hitler was demanding destruction, and the fate of one of the world's greatest cities rested on whether that man would obey or hesitate. Unlike your warm bed right now, unlike the safety you're wrapped in, Paris is cold with dread despite the August sun. Before we get started, if you're actually here to fall asleep to these stories, hit like or subscribe so I know you're out there, and drop a comment with your city and what time it is. Always love seeing listeners from New York to Berlin to Sydney, all tuning in at different hours. You know what I mean. All right, tonight we're going to Paris, August 1944. But first, seriously, get comfortable, adjust those pillows, pull that blanket up. Because where we're going, the stakes couldn't be higher, and you'll want to feel safe while we walk through one of history's closest calls. Your name doesn't matter much in this story. You're not the main character. You're a witness, an observer standing in the shadows of history, watching as one man decides whether the City of Light burns or survives. General Dietrich von Choltitz arrives in the city this morning. 50 years old, Prussian, professional soldier from a long line of military men. He's been appointed military governor of Paris by Hitler himself, not because of his charm, because of his record. Rotterdam, Sevastopol, cities he's helped destroy before. Hitler chose him for a reason. Von Choltitz rides through Paris in a staff car, and if you were standing on that street corner watching him pass, you'd see a man who looks exactly like what he is, an officer who follows orders. Gray uniform pressed sharp, face hard, weathered, eyes that have seen burning cities before and will see them again if commanded. He doesn't smile at Paris, doesn't gawk like a tourist at Notre Dame or the Eiffel Tower. He's not here to admire. He's here to hold or destroy. That's the order. Simple, final. It says if Paris cannot be held, it must be destroyed. Every bridge, every monument, everything that makes Paris Paris, wired with explosives ready to blow. Hitler's not subtle about it. The Fuhrer's already executed officers for less than retreat. Von Choltitz knows this, and everyone knows this. Betray Hitler, and your family pays the price. Your name gets erased. You become an example of what happens when you disobey. So von Choltitz takes his office in the Hotel Maurice. Fancy place. Gold trim, crystal chandeliers, the kind of building that's seen centuries of French history. Now it's German headquarters. Maps on the walls showing defensive positions, radio equipment, officers coming and going with reports, and in the basement, in the sewers beneath the city, in the foundations of every major building, 24 tons of dynamite, already placed, already wired, just waiting for one word. The German engineers have been thorough. The Pont Neuf, oldest bridge in Paris, completed in 1607, charges set. Pont Alexandre III with its golden sculptures, wired. The Eiffel Tower itself, that iron symbol of the city, rigged to collapse. The Grand Palais, the Opera, the Madeleine Church, all of it ready to go. One order, that's all it would take. Von Choltitz sits at his desk that first night and thinks about Rotterdam. He was there in 1940 when the Luftwaffe bombed the city center. Nearly 1,000 civilians dead. The fires visible for miles. That's how he earned his reputation. The Smasher of Sevastopol, they called him, after the brutal siege of 1942. Artillery pounding Soviet positions until the fortress fell. He knows how to destroy cities. He's done it before. But Paris is different somehow. He can feel it walking through the streets. This isn't just another occupied city. It's Paris, the heart of Western civilization. The city where revolution was born, where Hemingway wrote, where art and culture and history stack so deep you can't step without treading on something important. Does that matter? Should it matter to a soldier whose only job is following orders? Von Koltitz doesn't know yet, but the question starts gnawing at him. You can feel the tension building in Paris. It's August, and everyone knows the Allies landed in Normandy 2 months ago. The liberation is coming. The only question is when. The French resistance knows. They're watching, waiting, preparing. Secret meetings in basements, weapons hidden in attics, plans for an uprising when the moment comes. The German garrison knows. Undermanned, undersupplied, spread thin, trying to hold a city that doesn't want them. Young soldiers and old reservists, not the elite troops. Those are all fighting on the real fronts, in Normandy, in the east. What's left in Paris is the bottom of the barrel, and von Choltitz knows. He reads the reports. The Atlantic Wall has fallen. The Allies are racing across France. Every day brings them closer. This garrison can't hold Paris forever. Maybe not even for a week if the resistance rises and the Allies push hard. So the order sits there on his desk. Burn Paris. Simple words, impossible weight. August 15th. Von Koltitz calls his engineers in. They spread maps across his desk, showing every explosive placement. Show him the detonation sequence. Explain how long it would take to reduce Paris to rubble. 6 hours, they tell him, maybe 8 if we're thorough. 8 hours to erase 2,000 years of history. The engineers are proud of their work. Professional, efficient, German. They've calculated the precise amount of explosive needed for each structure, factored in structural weak points, planned backup charges in case the first don't work. They're ready, just waiting for the order. Von Koltitz dismisses them without giving it. Not yet. He needs to think. That night, he can't sleep. He lies in his quarters in the Hotel Maurice, plush bed, far cry from a battlefield tent, and stares at the ceiling. He thinks about his wife and 3 children back in Germany, safe for now, but within reach of the Gestapo if he makes the wrong choice. He thinks about the July 20th plot to assassinate Hitler, just weeks ago. The conspirators were tortured, executed, their families arrested. That's what happens to generals who disobey. He thinks about Rotterdam, about the screaming, about how fire sounds when it consumes a city block, about the smell that never quite leaves your memory. He thinks about Paris outside his window, quiet under curfew, unaware that its entire existence balances on one man's decision. Unlike your soft pillow, unlike your peaceful room, von Koltitz's nights in Paris are anything but restful. August 19th, something breaks. The Paris police go on strike. Just stop working. Refuse to take orders from the occupation authorities. It spreads fast. Other workers joining. Resistance fighters seizing the Préfecture de Police. Barricades going up in the streets. The uprising has begun. Von Koltitz watches reports flood in. Gunfights across the city. Germans pinned down in certain neighborhoods. The population, sensing liberation, pouring into the streets. And in Berlin, Hitler's rage is volcanic. The teletype machines in von Koltitz's headquarters clatter constantly now. Message after message, each more furious than the last. Is Paris burning? Burn Paris. Destroy the bridges. Level the monuments. The Führer demands it. Von Koltitz stands in his office reading these messages. His hands don't shake. Professional soldier. He's received terrible orders before, but he doesn't act on them either. Not yet. Something else is happening. Something that will change everything. A man comes to visit von Koltitz, Swedish consul general named Raoul Nordling. Diplomat, middle-aged, speaks perfect German and French. He's one of the few people who can move freely between the German occupation authorities and the French resistance, and he's come to broker something impossible, a ceasefire, to save Paris from becoming a battlefield. General, Nordling says, sitting across from von Koltitz in the Hotel Meurice, I know your orders. I know what Berlin wants, but I'm asking you to consider what history will remember. Von Koltitz doesn't respond immediately. He's been taught not to listen to appeals like this. Orders are orders. Sentiment is weakness. But Nordling keeps talking. The war is lost, he says quietly. You know it. I know it. Everyone knows it. Germany will fall, whether Paris burns or not. The only question is, how will you be remembered? As the man who saved one of humanity's greatest cities, or as the barbarian who destroyed it for spite? Von Koltitz still doesn't answer, but he doesn't throw Nordling out either, and that, in itself, is telling. Over the next few days, Nordling returns again and again. Each visit, he makes the same case in different words. Appeals to von Koltitz's sense of honor, his awareness that the war is ending, his understanding that executing this order won't save Germany, will only ensure his name lives in infamy forever. Von Koltitz listens, says little, gives nothing away, but he also doesn't give the order to blow the charges. The days tick by, August 20th, 21st, 22nd. The fighting in Paris intensifies. Resistance fighters control entire neighborhoods now. German patrols come under constant sniper fire. Barricades block major streets. The occupation that's lasted 4 years is disintegrating in real time, and the teletype machines keep clattering. Is Paris burning? Why is Paris not burning? Execute the order immediately. Von Koltitz sends messages back to Berlin, calm, professional messages saying preparations are ongoing, that he's awaiting the optimal moment, that logistics require coordination. He's stalling, dancing on a knife's edge between obedience and treason, because something else is happening. The Allies are coming. General Philippe Leclerc's 2nd Armored Division is racing toward Paris from the south. American forces close behind. Inside the city, the resistance is doing everything possible to hold on until help arrives. It's a race now. Can Paris survive long enough to be liberated? Or will Hitler's order come down with force before that can happen? August 23rd. The situation reaches critical mass. If you were walking through Paris this morning, you'd see a city at war with itself. Barricades thrown up overnight, furniture, cobblestones, anything heavy enough to stop a vehicle. German patrols moving in nervous clusters, rifles ready, watching windows for snipers. The resistance has taken the Préfecture de Police, not just seized it, fortified it. Machine guns in windows, French flags flying from the roof. German attempts to retake it have failed. 3 separate assaults, 3 failures, fighting throughout the city now. Not just isolated incidents, but genuine urban combat. German units scattered across Paris, each one cut off from the others. Communication lines down, supply routes blocked. Von Koltitz stands in his office in the Hotel Meurice, reading reports, each one worse than the last. Ammunition running low, no resupply possible, food stores depleted, medical supplies exhausted, morale collapsing, and most critically, reinforcements aren't coming. He's requested them repeatedly. Berlin promises them. But everyone knows the truth. There are no reinforcements. Every available unit is fighting the Allies in Normandy or trying to hold the Eastern Front. Paris is on its own. His garrison, maybe 5,000 combat-ready troops scattered across a city of 2 million hostile civilians. A few dozen tanks, some artillery pieces, against tens of thousands of resistance fighters who know every street, every building, every hiding place. Military logic is clear. He can't hold Paris, not with what he has, not against a population in open revolt. Standard doctrine says destroy it, deny it to the Allies, make them pay for every meter they advance. Scorched earth. If you can't hold ground, make sure the enemy can't use it either. The explosives are ready. The engineers are ready. One order, and Paris burns. But von Koltitz doesn't give it. Instead, he issues defensive positions, tells his officers to prepare for street fighting, requests reinforcements he knows won't come, goes through the motions of preparing to hold the city, while doing almost nothing to prepare for its destruction. His staff officers notice. Some are confused. They've read the orders from Berlin. They know what Hitler wants. Why isn't the general executing those orders? Others are quietly relieved. No one wants to be the man who blew up Notre Dame. No one wants that on their conscience. But no one says this aloud. You don't question orders. Not in the Wehrmacht. Not in 1944 when Hitler's executing generals for less. So they wait. They watch von Koltitz, try to read his face, his body language, looking for hints about what he's thinking. They find nothing. Professional soldier. Gives nothing away. But the order is still there. The explosives are still in place. The detonators armed and ready. One word from von Koltitz, and it all ends. One word, and the Pont Neuf, standing since 1607, collapses into the Seine. One word, and Notre Dame's flying buttresses crack, and the whole structure comes down. One word, and the Eiffel Tower, that iron symbol of Paris itself, buckles and falls. He doesn't say that word. Not today. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But the day isn't over. And Berlin is watching. The teletype machine in the communications room clatters constantly now. Message after message from Hitler's headquarters. Why is Paris not burning? Execute the demolition orders immediately. Bridges must be destroyed before Allied advance. The Führer demands compliance. Von Koltitz reads each message, files them carefully, sends back responses that are masterpieces of bureaucratic delay. Demolition preparations proceeding as ordered, awaiting optimal tactical moment for execution. Engineering units coordinating final placements require additional time for complete coverage. Resistance activity complicating execution timeline, addressing security concerns before proceeding. It's all stalling, elegant, professional stalling, but stalling nonetheless. How long can he keep this up? How many more messages before Berlin sends someone to relieve him? Or worse, sends SS units to execute the order without his approval? Von Koltitz doesn't know. He's dancing on a knife's edge. One wrong move, one moment of obvious disobedience, and it's over. For him, for his family, for any hope of influencing what happens to Paris. So he keeps playing the game, keeps stalling, keeps waiting for something to change. That evening, Raoul Nordling returns. The Swedish diplomat has been shuttling between German headquarters and resistance leaders for days now, trying to broker some kind of ceasefire, trying to prevent Paris from becoming a Stalingrad style urban battlefield. General, Nordling says, settling into the chair across from von Choltitz's desk, the situation is deteriorating rapidly. I'm aware. Von Choltitz's voice is flat, tired. The Allies are less than 20 kilometers away. Leclerc's division will be here in 2 days, perhaps less. I know. Then you also know that Berlin's orders. Nordling pauses, choosing his words carefully. That executing those orders now would serve no military purpose. You cannot hold Paris. The Allies will take it regardless. The only question is how much destruction happens in the process. Von Choltitz doesn't respond. He's heard this argument before. It makes perfect sense, which doesn't make it any easier to act on. Your name will be attached to whatever happens here, Nordling continues quietly. In 50 years, in 100 years, historians will write about this moment, about you, the man who destroyed Paris, or the man who saved it. I'm a soldier, von Choltitz says finally. I follow orders. You're a man, Nordling counters, who must live with consequences of his choices. Silence fills the office. Outside, sporadic gunfire echoes through the streets, the sound of a city tearing itself apart. The war is over, Nordling says. Germany has lost. You know this. Everyone knows this. All that remains is how many more people die, how much more beauty is destroyed. For what? For Hitler's ego? Von Choltitz stands, walks to the window. Paris spreads out below him. Wounded but still standing. Still Paris. What do you want from me? He asks without turning around. Nothing you're not already doing, Nordling replies carefully. Continue delaying. Continue waiting. 2 more days. That's all. Let the Allies arrive. Let history judge you as a reasonable man who recognized futility and chose mercy. And if Berlin sends orders I cannot ignore, then you'll have done everything possible, but I don't think those orders will come. Berlin is collapsing. Hitler is isolated. The men around him are already thinking about their own survival. No one wants to be the one who ordered Paris destroyed for no strategic gain. Nordling leaves. Von Choltitz remains at the window, staring out at the city he's been ordered to destroy. The city he still might destroy. The city he probably won't. The knife's edge gets thinner every hour. August 24th. Dawn comes gray and tense. If you were standing on a Paris street corner at 6 a.m., you'd hear it before you saw anything. Church bells, starting with one, then another, then suddenly dozens across the city, ringing freely, joyfully, defiantly. For 4 years, those bells have been silent, forbidden under occupation. Now they're ringing like the city itself is singing. People emerge from buildings cautiously at first, then with growing excitement. Something's happened. Something's changed. A small reconnaissance unit from Leclerc's 2nd Armored Division has slipped through German lines during the night. Maybe 20 vehicles, led by Captain Raymond Drahn. They've reached the Hotel de Ville in the city center. It's symbolic more than strategic. A gesture, a promise. The real liberation force isn't here yet, but this is proof they're coming. Proof that help is on the way. The people of Paris don't care about strategic versus symbolic. They pour into the streets, weeping, singing, embracing strangers. Impromptu celebrations breaking out everywhere. Von Choltitz hears the bells from his office, knows immediately what they mean. His staff officers are panicking, requesting permission to engage, to hunt down this reconnaissance unit, to restore order. No, von Koltitz says calmly. Let them celebrate. It changes nothing. But it does change things. It changes everything. Because now the people of Paris believe liberation is here. They're acting like the war is over, like the Germans are already defeated. Self-fulfilling prophecy. If enough people believe it, it becomes true. Von Koltitz knows this. He's seen it before in other cities, other defeats. The moment when the occupied population stops being afraid, stops obeying, starts acting like they've already won, that's the moment you've lost control. Can't get it back without massacring civilians. And even that doesn't always work. He could still destroy Paris. The explosives are ready. But destroying an occupied city is one thing. Destroying a celebrating city, a city full of people dancing in the streets, that's something different. That's not military necessity. That's spite. That's vengeance. Is he capable of that? Has his career as a soldier prepared him to give that order? He doesn't know, doesn't want to find out. The celebrations continue all day, cautious at first, then building. People bringing out bottles of wine hidden for years. Resistance fighters emerging from underground. French flags everywhere suddenly, as if they'd been waiting in drawers and closets for exactly this moment. German patrols watch nervously. Some units try to disperse crowds. Others just fall back, avoid confrontation. The garrison is fracturing, each commander making his own decisions because coordination has collapsed. And in the Hotel Maurice, von Koltitz sits at his desk and waits. He knows Leclerc's full division is coming, knows they'll arrive tomorrow, maybe tonight, knows that once they're in the city, his window for destruction closes completely. He has maybe 12 hours to make his final decision. 12 hours to be the man who saves Paris or the man who murders it. That evening, he sits alone. His staff officers have gone to manage their positions. The radio operators are monitoring channels, waiting for orders from Berlin that will probably never come. The city outside is settling into an uneasy night. Celebrations dying down, curfew approaching, everyone waiting for tomorrow. Von Koltitz writes a letter to his wife. He's been writing to her throughout his time in Paris, careful letters that say very little because German military mail is monitored. This letter's different, more honest, more raw. Paris is beautiful, he writes, more beautiful than I imagined. I understand now why people fight for it, why they would die for it. It's not just buildings and bridges. It's something else, something I can't quite name. He pauses, pen hovering over paper. I have been given an order I hope never to execute, an order that would make me infamous forever. I delay because I am a coward, or because I am a man. I'm not sure there's a difference anymore. He doesn't send this letter. Can't. Too honest, too revealing, but writing it helps somehow, clarifies something in his mind. He burns it in his ashtray, watches the paper curl and blacken, watches his words disappear into smoke. Then he goes to bed, lies in the darkness, doesn't sleep. Outside his window, Paris breathes, waiting, hoping, not knowing how close it came, how close it still is to becoming ash. August 25th. The morning breaks, clear and bright. You'd hear them coming from kilometers away. The deep rumble of tank engines, the grinding of treads on pavement, the unmistakable sound of an army arriving. Leclerc's 2nd Armored Division enters Paris from multiple directions. Southern approach, Western approach. Columns of Sherman tanks and half-tracks rolling through streets that erupt with celebration as they pass. People throw flowers, bottles of wine, anything they can offer. Climb onto the tanks, kiss the soldiers, sing the Marseillaise at the top of their lungs. It's liberation, the real thing this time, not a symbolic gesture, but the full weight of Allied military power rolling into the heart of Paris. The German garrison responds chaotically. Some units fight hard, defending their positions with everything they have. Others surrender immediately, relieved it's finally over. Still others just melt away, ditch their uniforms, try to disappear into the civilian population. There's no coordinated defense, no grand strategy, and just fragments of an occupation falling apart in real time. And von Koltitz watches it happen from the Hotel Maurice. His staff officers wait for orders. The engineers stand ready. The detonators are armed. The explosives under every bridge, every monument, every major building, all waiting for one word. He could still do it, even now, even with Allied tanks in the streets. He could give the order, blow the charges, bring Paris down as the Germans retreat, make the Allies pay for every meter. That's what Hitler ordered. That's what a loyal officer does. Von Choltitz stands at his window, watches French tanks pass below, hears the celebration, the joy, the liberation happening despite everything, despite him. And he makes his choice. He doesn't make it dramatically, doesn't announce it to his staff, doesn't send a message to Berlin explaining his decision. He just doesn't give the order. The morning passes, the tanks keep rolling, the garrison keeps collapsing, and the explosives stay dormant. Around 10:30 a.m., von Choltitz's communications officer reports that radio contact with Berlin has been lost. Not cut deliberately, just overwhelmed by the chaos. The equipment is working, but no one's answering on the other end. "Sir," the officer asks, "do you want me to keep trying?" "No," von Choltitz says. "I don't think that will be necessary." By 11 a.m., French tanks have reached the Hotel Maurice. There's a brief firefight at the entrance. Von Choltitz's security detail puts up token resistance, firing a few shots, then surrendering quickly. Professional soldiers know when it's over. The building is cleared floor by floor, German soldiers disarmed and marched out. The command center taken intact. And when French officers finally reach von Choltitz's office, they find him waiting behind his desk. Uniform pressed, posture military straight, face giving nothing away, not fighting, not fleeing, not destroying, just waiting to surrender. "Gentlemen," he says in careful French, standing as they enter, "I am prepared to surrender this garrison." One of the French officers, a major, young, still wearing dust from the advance, stares at him. "You're von Choltitz?" "I am General Dietrich von Choltitz, military governor of Paris. I wish to formally surrender to the appropriate French authority." The major exchanges glances with his companions. They'd been expecting resistance, a last stand, maybe booby traps, not this calm, formal military protocol. "Come with us," the major says. They take von Choltitz down through his own headquarters, past his staff officers, already disarmed and lined up, past the radio room with its silent equipment, past the maps showing defensive positions that don't matter anymore, out into the street where Paris is celebrating its liberation. The crowds don't recognize him, don't know that this gray uniformed officer being escorted to a vehicle is the man who held their fate in his hands. The man who could have reduced their city to rubble with one word. He watches them celebrate. His face shows nothing. But what's he thinking? Relief? Regret? Fear about what comes next? Pride in making the harder choice? Shame at betraying his orders? No one knows. He never says. They drive him through celebrating streets to the Prefecture de Police, the same building the resistance seized days before, the symbol of their uprising, now the scene of formal German surrender. Inside, General Leclerc waits, the man who led the drive to liberate Paris, the man who's been racing to reach the city before it could be destroyed. The meeting is brief. Two officers conducting military business. A document is prepared, terms of surrender. Simple, straightforward. The German garrison will lay down arms. Prisoners will be taken into custody. Wounded will receive medical care. The occupation officially ends. Von Koltitz signs it. His hand doesn't shake. Leclerc signs it. Accepts the surrender formally, professionally. Your officers have performed the demolitions? Leclerc asks. Standard question. Need to know what damage control might be necessary. No, von Koltitz says. There have been no demolitions. Leclerc looks at him sharply. None? None. A pause. Leclerc seems to be waiting for more. Von Koltitz offers nothing. Why not? Leclerc finally asks. Von Koltitz considers this question. The question that will define the rest of his life. The question historians will debate for decades. It seemed, he says carefully, militarily pointless. The war is ending. Paris will stand regardless. I saw no purpose in its destruction. It's a careful answer, professional, reasonable, also completely inadequate to explain the real complexity of the choice. But it's the answer he gives, the answer he'll keep giving, with minor variations, for the next 22 years. Leclerc nods slowly, accepts this. What else can he do? The city stands. That's what matters. You'll be taken into custody as a prisoner of war, Leclerc says. You'll be treated according to Geneva Convention standards. I understand. And that's it. That's how it ends. Not with an explosion, not with fire, not with Paris reduced to rubble, with two officers signing a document, with a brief conversation, with the quiet close of a chapter that could have ended in apocalypse. Von Koltitz is led away. Outside, Paris explodes with joy. Church bells ring. People dance in the streets. Resistance fighters emerge into daylight. 4 years of occupation ending in a single day. And somewhere in the sewers beneath the city, in the foundations of bridges, in the walls of monuments, tons of explosives remain inert, never triggered, never given purpose, just sitting there as silent testament to the order that wasn't followed, the destruction that didn't happen, the miracle, if you want to call it that, of hesitation winning over obedience. The word spreads through Paris like wildfire. The German commander has been captured. The city is free. Engineers throughout Paris who'd been waiting for the demolition order stand down. The explosives under the bridges remain inert. The charges beneath the monuments are never triggered. Paris, against all odds, against Hitler's explicit orders, has been saved. But the question that would haunt historians forever was only beginning to take shape. Why? The streets of Paris explode with joy. You can barely imagine it. 4 years of occupation ending in a single day. People streaming from buildings. Resistance fighters emerging from hiding. Women kissing soldiers. Strangers embracing. Bottles of champagne that had been hidden for years suddenly appearing. The Marseillaise sung openly for the first time in 4 years. French flags everywhere, replacing the swastikas that had hung over the city like a curse. Von Choltitz is driven through this celebration in a military vehicle, prisoner now. The crowds don't know who he is, don't know that this gray uniformed officer sitting silently in the back of a jeep is the man who could have destroyed everything they're celebrating. He watches them, doesn't speak. His face gives nothing away. What's he thinking? Regret? Relief? Fear about what comes next? No one knows. He never says. At the Préfecture de Police, the same building the resistance seized days before, von Choltitz formally surrenders to General Leclerc. The meeting is brief, professional, two officers conducting military business. The document is signed. The occupation officially ends. Von Choltitz becomes a prisoner of war, his fate now in Allied hands, and the questions begin immediately. Why didn't he destroy Paris? Journalists ask, intelligence officers ask, historians will ask for decades. Von Choltitz's answers are maddeningly vague. He talks about military reality, the impossibility of executing the order with Allied forces so close, the breakdown in communications, the strategic futility of destruction. He doesn't claim to be a hero, doesn't paint himself as a man of conscience, just presents himself as a pragmatic officer who assessed the situation and concluded destruction served no purpose. But that answer satisfies no one. The French want to believe they were saved by moral awakening. The Germans, those trying to rehabilitate the Wehrmacht's reputation, want to believe he acted from soldiers' honor. Historians want something concrete, provable, documented. The truth, as always, is messier than any single narrative can capture. Von Choltitz was a professional soldier who'd followed terrible orders before. Rotterdam, Sevastopol, cities left in ruins because he did his job. He wasn't a resistance fighter, wasn't secretly opposed to the Nazi regime. He served it faithfully for years. But in Paris, for reasons probably not entirely clear even to himself, he hesitated, stalled, waited. And by the time the moment passed, liberation had arrived, and the choice was made by default. Was it conscience? Perhaps partly. Was it fear of being remembered as a destroyer? Almost certainly. Was it Nordling's persuasion? Likely a factor. Was it simple recognition that the war was lost and further destruction was pointless? Probably that too. Human decisions, especially ones of this magnitude, rarely have single causes. They're the result of dozens of factors colliding in one moment: fear, hope, pride, calculation, exhaustion, conscience, pragmatism, all mixed together until you can't separate them. What matters is the outcome. Paris stands, the bridges span the Seine, Notre Dame rises over the Ile de la Cité, the Louvre still holds its treasures. The city that had been the heart of Western civilization for centuries remains intact, not because the Allies fought brilliantly to save it, not because the explosives malfunctioned, but because one man, at the moment of decision, chose not to give the order. In the grand narrative of World War II, filled with battles and invasions and turning points, this is a different kind of victory, one won not on a battlefield, but in a quiet moment of refusal, in the space between an order given and an order executed, in whatever lived inside General von Choltitz that made him pause, hesitate, delay until the choice was made for him. Von Choltitz spends the next 2.5 years as a prisoner of war, first in France, then Britain, finally in a camp in Mississippi, far from Europe, far from the ruins of the Reich he served. During those years, The world learns the full scope of what Nazi Germany did. Concentration camps liberated, the Holocaust revealed, the Nuremberg trials documenting the machinery of genocide. In that context, the story of one general who chose not to destroy one city seems almost trivial. But as historians sift through the wreckage, the question keeps returning. Why Paris? Why did Hitler order its destruction? Why did von Koltitz disobey? What does that moment reveal about moral choice under totalitarian command? In the early 1950s, released from captivity, von Koltitz collaborates with a journalist on a memoir, Is Paris Burning? The book presents him as a man who wrestled with his conscience and chose humanity over orders. He describes receiving Hitler's command and feeling, for the first time in his military career, profound moral revulsion. Walking through Paris, recognizing it as something transcending any single nation or ideology, making the decision to defy Hitler and preserve the city for future generations. The book is successful. Von Koltitz becomes, in popular memory, the good German who resisted evil at great personal risk. It allows post-war Germany to claim that not all Wehrmacht officers were complicit, that there were men of honor who drew moral lines. But uncomfortable questions linger. If von Koltitz was truly motivated by conscience, why didn't he refuse to bomb Rotterdam? To shell Sevastopol? Why did his moral awakening occur only in Paris, only when the war was clearly lost? Critics point out that disobeying Hitler in August 1944, with the Reich collapsing and allies at the gates, was very different from disobeying in 1940 or 1941, when Germany was ascendant and defiance meant certain death. Some historians suggest von Koltitz's decision was less about morality and more about survival, a calculated bet that the Allies would treat him more leniently if he surrendered Paris intact. Others argue he simply lacked the resources and will to carry out demolition in the face of overwhelming opposition. The debate becomes a proxy war for larger questions about guilt, responsibility, and redemption in post-war Germany. In 1966, the story reaches its widest audience. Hollywood adapts the book into a film, also titled Is Paris Burning?, directed by René Clément with an all-star cast. The movie dramatizes von Koltitz's struggle, portrays him as a man torn between duty and conscience, ultimately choosing to save the city. The film is a hit, cementing in popular imagination the narrative of the noble German general who defied Hitler to save Paris. But even as the movie plays worldwide, historians keep uncovering documents that complicate the story. Records suggest von Koltitz did prepare for demolition, but that logistical problems, communication breakdowns, and the rapid Allied advance made full execution nearly impossible. Some explosive charges were removed by resistance fighters. Some engineering units had already retreated or surrendered. The truth is messier than the myth. Von Koltitz did receive Hitler's order. He did have the means, at least partially, to carry it out, and he did ultimately choose not to execute it fully. But that choice wasn't a single dramatic moment of moral clarity. It was a series of delays, hesitations, and calculated decisions spread across chaotic days, influenced by military realities, diplomatic pressure, personal fear, and yes, perhaps some measure of conscience. He wasn't a hero in the classical sense. He was a man who found himself at a hinge point in history and made a choice that happened to align with preservation rather than destruction. Whether he deserves credit or whether he simply failed to execute an act of evil remains debated. But the outcome is beyond dispute. Paris stands. To understand the significance of what didn't happen in Paris, look at what did happen elsewhere. Warsaw, 1944. When the Polish Home Army rose against German occupation, almost simultaneously with the Paris uprising, Hitler's response was unambiguous and brutal. He ordered the city systematically destroyed. SS units carried out that order with methodical efficiency. For 63 days, German forces bombarded Warsaw, burned neighborhoods, executed civilians en masse, demolished anything left standing. By the time the uprising was crushed, over 200,000 people were dead, and 85% of the city lay in ruins. Historic churches, libraries, archives, obliterated. This was what Hitler wanted for Paris. This was the fate von Choltitz was ordered to inflict. The fact that Paris was spared while Warsaw was annihilated reveals the razor-thin line between preservation and apocalypse. The same pattern repeated across Germany itself in spring 1945. Hitler issued the Nero Decree, scorched earth directive ordering destruction of all infrastructure to prevent it falling into enemy hands. Albert Speer later claimed he sabotaged this order, but in many places it was carried out. Bridges blown, factories demolished, cities made waste. In this context, von Choltitz's refusal to destroy Paris wasn't just an isolated act of mercy. It was an anomaly, a deviation from the pattern of nihilistic destruction that defined the Nazi regime's final months. What made Paris different? Was it individual intervention, Nordling's persuasion? Was it the speed of Allied advance? Was it that von Choltitz, unlike many counterparts, could see beyond the immediate moment to history's verdict? Consider what would have been lost. The Louvre. During the war, many treasures were evacuated and hidden, but thousands of works remained. The Venus de Milo, collections of medieval manuscripts, the architectural masterpieces scattered throughout the city. These weren't just French treasures, they were part of humanity's common heritage, irreplaceable records of human creativity stretching back centuries. To destroy them would have been to amputate human memory itself. And yet Hitler ordered exactly that. And officers across occupied Europe carried out similar orders without hesitation. The bridges themselves deserve special attention. The Pont Neuf, built between 1578 and 1607, oldest bridge in Paris, witness to the entire arc of modern French history. The Pont Alexandre III, completed in 1900, masterpiece of Art Nouveau engineering, its single steel arch spanning the Seine, 4 golden statues of Pegasus marking its corners. These bridges weren't merely functional, they were symbols, physical manifestations of continuity and connection. To destroy them would have severed Paris from itself, turned the city into disconnected islands of rubble and memory. Von Choltitz's engineers had calculated exactly how much explosive each bridge needed, exactly where to place charges for maximum structural damage. The plans existed, materials were ready. All that was missing was the final command. That command never came. By the time von Choltitz surrendered on August 25th, the window for total destruction had effectively closed. Allied forces were in the city. The German garrison was collapsing. Even if he'd given the order in those final hours, it's unclear whether his engineers could have executed it fully. But evidence suggests he could have done significant damage, could have brought down at least some bridges, could have detonated at least some charges. The fact that none of this occurred, that Paris emerged battered but fundamentally intact, stands as one of the war's great what-ifs, a reminder that history often turns not on grand strategies or massive battles, but on individual choices made in moments of extreme pressure, when the easy path is obedience and the hard path is refusal. Von Koltitz dies in 1966, age 71, in Baden-Baden, West Germany. Those 2 decades after the war are spent in a liminal existence, neither fully condemned nor fully celebrated. A man caught between 2 competing versions of his story. He returns to a Germany grappling with its Nazi past in ways often uncomfortable and incomplete. The immediate post-war years are dominated by survival, reconstruction, the Nuremberg trials focusing on the regime's highest-ranking criminals. Von Koltitz is never charged with war crimes. His actions in Rotterdam and Sevastopol are documented but not prosecuted. In the context of broader atrocities, his record seems relatively minor. He followed orders, but he didn't participate in genocide. He bombed cities, but so did Allied commanders, and crucially, he saved Paris. That final act provides a shield of moral ambiguity that protects him from serious scrutiny. The memoir, published in the early 1950s, marks the beginning of his rehabilitation. He appears at conferences, gives interviews, allows himself to be portrayed as a man who wrestled with moral complexities and emerged on the side of humanity. He's careful in these appearances, never claiming to be a hero, never fully acknowledging the extent of earlier complicity, speaking of Paris as a turning point. A moment when he realized blindly following orders was no longer morally defensible. He avoids discussing Rotterdam in detail, frames Sevastopol as legitimate military operation, presents himself as a professional soldier who served his country, made difficult decisions, and ultimately chose preservation when it mattered most. It's a carefully constructed narrative, and for the most part, it works. By the time of his death, he's remembered primarily as the man who saved Paris, not as the man who destroyed other cities. But history keeps excavating. Declassified documents reveal Hitler's order to destroy Paris was indeed absolute, but logistical capacity to carry it out had been severely compromised. Speed of Allied advance, sabotage within German ranks. Some officers under von Choltitz's command later admit they deliberately delayed or undermined demolition preparations, either from moral objection or simple pragmatism. The resistance cut communication lines, removed explosive charges from several locations. The chaos meant that even if von Choltitz had wanted full execution of Hitler's order, he might not have been able to. The question of how much agency he actually had remains contested. What's not contested is the broader pattern of his career. Von Choltitz was not a Nazi ideologue, but he was a willing participant in a war of aggression and atrocity. Rotterdam, May 1940. Nearly 1,000 civilians killed in bombing, widely condemned as violation of laws of war. Sevastopol, one of the bloodiest campaigns on the Eastern Front. Tens of thousands of Soviet soldiers and civilians died from starvation, disease, bombardment. He served the Reich loyally and effectively until the moment when loyalty no longer served his interests. To understand von Choltitz is to understand the uncomfortable reality that most people who participate in atrocity aren't monsters. They're ordinary individuals who make a series of small compromises, who follow orders, who rationalize their actions, who only confront moral weight when the structure demanding those actions begins collapsing. The question of whether von Koltitz deserves to be remembered as Paris's savior or as a war criminal who happened to fail in his final assignment is ultimately unanswerable, because it depends on what moral framework you apply. Judge him by outcome. Paris stands, he deserves credit for not destroying it. Judge him by intentions. Evidence suggests those intentions were mixed at best, shaped more by self-preservation and pragmatism than moral clarity. Judge him by full career. He committed acts of violence against civilians and only balked when orders became so extreme and pointless that even a loyal officer could see they served no purpose. Perhaps the most honest assessment, von Koltitz was neither hero nor villain, but simply a man who found himself at a moment of historical consequence and made a choice that, for whatever reason, aligned with preservation. That's not redemption, but in the context of World War II, where so many chose destruction, it's worth remembering. Today, if you walk across the Pont Alexandre III in Paris, golden statues gleaming, Eiffel Tower ritzing in the distance, it's easy to forget how close all this came to annihilation. Tourists pose for photographs. Lovers attach padlocks to railings. The river flows beneath as it has for millennia, indifferent to dramas that unfolded on its banks. There's no plaque commemorating explosives that were never detonated, no monument to the order never fully executed. Paris survived, and in surviving, it erased most visible scars of its near-death experience. But the story of those August days remains lodged in the city's memory, a ghost narrative haunting the edges of its celebrated liberation. A reminder that history is often shaped not by what happens, but by what almost happens and then doesn't. The legacy of Dietrich von Koltitz is equally invisible, equally contested. No statue of him in Paris, no street bearing his name, no public acknowledgement beyond occasional mention in liberation histories. In Germany, he's largely forgotten, a minor figure in a war that produced so many more dramatic personalities. The memoir has faded from public consciousness, overshadowed by more comprehensive accounts, more critical examinations of Wehrmacht complicity in Nazi crimes. The 1966 film is rarely screened anymore, a relic of when audiences accepted simplified narratives of heroism and redemption. Von Koltitz exists now primarily in academic debates, in footnotes, in the kind of historical arguments that interest specialists but rarely penetrate popular consciousness. Perhaps that's fitting. He wasn't a hero in any conventional sense. He was a man who did one arguably decent thing after doing many terrible things, who spent the rest of his life trying to rewrite that ratio in his favor. But the deeper question his story raises is about the nature of moral choice under totalitarian regimes. How do we judge individuals who participate in systems of atrocity? Is it enough to refuse one order after following dozens? Can a single act of disobedience redeem a career of complicity? Or is the very framing of these questions a way of avoiding the harder truth that most people in von Koltitz's position would have done exactly what he did? Following orders right up until the moment when following orders became personally disadvantageous? The uncomfortable reality, von Koltitz did not save Paris because he had a moral epiphany. He saved Paris because the strategic situation made destruction pointless, because influential people appealed to his vanity and fear of historical judgment, because the infrastructure of obedience that kept him in line for years was collapsing. That doesn't make his choice meaningless, but it does make it less inspiring than mythology suggests. What makes the story worth remembering isn't von Choltitz himself, it's what Paris represents. One of the few major European cities to emerge from World War II largely intact. London, bombed, Berlin, destroyed, Warsaw, systematically demolished, Dresden, firebombed into oblivion, Stalingrad, reduced to rubble. Across the continent, cities that had stood for centuries were erased or brutally scarred. Paris, by combination of luck, timing, diplomacy, and one man's hesitation, was spared. That preservation matters not because of what it says about von Choltitz, but because of what it says about civilization's fragility. Everything we build, everything we create, every monument, bridge, work of art, exists only because people in positions of power choose not to destroy it. That choice is never guaranteed, always contingent, always dependent on character and calculations of individuals who may or may not rise to the moment. Paris reminds us how easily it could all be lost. How much depends on decisions of flawed, conflicted, ordinary people at extraordinary moments. The secret of General von Choltitz, then, is that there was no secret. He wasn't a hero waiting to emerge, wasn't a man of unusual conscience or courage. He was simply a soldier who reached the end of a catastrophic war and chose, for reasons probably not entirely clear even to himself, not to execute one final act of meaningless destruction. That choice saved one of the world's great cities, preserved bridges and monuments and works of art that have enriched human life for generations since. But it didn't redeem him, didn't erase what came before. It simply meant that on one August day in 1944, when history balanced on a knife's edge, he chose preservation over obedience. Paris, beautiful and fragile and irreplaceable, still stands because of it. That's not a story of heroism. It's something more complicated and more human. A story of failure, compromise, and the stubborn survival of beauty in a world bent on its destruction. And maybe, in the end, that is enough. Unlike your warm bed right now, unlike the safety and peace you're wrapped in, Paris in August 1944 teetered on the edge of annihilation. One man's choice, born of conscience or calculation or cowardice or courage or all of these things mixed together, let the city survive. The bridges still span the Seine. Notre Dame still rises over the Ile de la Cité. The Louvre still holds its treasures. People still walk streets where Hemingway once walked, where revolution was born, where centuries of human achievement are layered like sediment. All of it still there, still standing, still Paris. Because one exhausted, conflicted man looked at an order to destroy it all and hesitated. And in that hesitation, in that space between command and execution, history turned. Close your eyes now. Feel the weight of your blanket, the softness of your pillow, the safety of your room. Paris survived so nights like this could exist, so people could rest in peace, so beauty could outlast brutality. The city of light endures. The bridges stand. The monuments rise against the sky. And somewhere in that fact, in that simple, stubborn survival, is a lesson about what matters when everything else has burned away. Sleep well.